the headlines, the UN Sanctions Committee on North Korea convenes an emergency meeting and calls Pyongyang's latest missile launch a clear violation of existing resolutions. The initial results of the drone investigation are out. Seoul's defense ministry confirms that all signs point to Pyongyang as the culprit behind the recent infiltration of the drones. Plus, Russia threatens to cut off gas to Ukraine unless the country pays in advance for all its supplies. The U.S. says the move is a ploy by Moscow to control Ukraine. With these stories and more next on ARIRANG News at 8. Good evening and thank you for joining us. It's Friday, April 11th here in Seoul. I am Yoo Ji-hye. We begin this evening with international efforts to counter North Korea's recent threats. A UN Sanctions Committee convened an emergency meeting in Washington and discussed the regime's missile launches and ways to curb further provocations on the Korean peninsula. Our Shin Se-min reports.
A clear violation of UN resolutions. That was the conclusion that the UN's North Korea Sanctions Committee came to during an emergency meeting on Thursday local time. The meeting was a first since Pyongyang launched 2 mid-range ballistic missiles late last month, and UN sources say the panel agreed to come up with countermeasures to deal with the threat. As for when, the sources say the committee will wait until May to hold further talks after a report from a North Korean specialist is finalized. To no one's surprise, South Korea, the U.S., Britain, and France supported the statement, while China and Russia were more cautious, saying the wider issue of securing peace and stability on the Korean peninsula was a most pressing concern. A day before the committee meeting, South Korean Defense Minister Kim Kwon-jin received a phone call from his U.S. counterpart Chuck Hagel, with both agreeing to work hand-in-hand to counter threats posed by Pyongyang. During their 20-minute phone conversation, the two agreed that Pyongyang's missile and nuclear weapons pose a grave challenge to the Korean peninsula and international community. Hagel also informed Kim of Washington's plan to dispatch 2 additional Aegis-equipped destroyers to Japan by 2017 to counter the North Korea threat. Also on Thursday, a former U.S. non-proliferation official said the international community should step up its efforts for targeted sanctions on the North Korean leadership. Speaking at a forum hosted by the 38 North website, Joseph De Thomas said it was important to find mechanisms that go after the North Korean regime and not its people. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, Pyongyang has warned Washington of strong countermeasures if it maintains its so-called hostile North Korea policies, which some see as a threat of a 4th nuclear test. North Korea's National Defense Commission said Friday that the United States, along with the international community, has been critical of Pyongyang's rocket launches, but has not raised issue with South Korea's ballistic missile launches last month. The Communist state called this part of Washington's two-sided nature and added it must withdraw all sanctions on Pyongyang. Experts say the strong countermeasures Pyongyang is referring to could be additional missile launches or a 4th nuclear test. The interim results of the drone investigation have been released. The South Korean government strongly believes the 3 drones recently found in different parts of the South came from North Korea. To confirm and reinforce their findings, they now turn to a team of GPS experts. Choi Yoo-sun has the details.
The investigative team has found a sizable amount of circumstantial evidence from the aerial vehicle's characteristics and loaded equipment that confirms the drones were sent by North Korea.
On Friday, the South Korean government revealed what it knows so far about the 3 unmanned aerial vehicles found crashed in Paju, north of Seoul, on the western island of Baekneung-do and in Samcheok, Gangwon-do province. The Defense Ministry said identification information on the parts used inside the drone's engines, data transmitter receivers, and computer chips appear to have been intentionally damaged, another factor that points the finger at Pyongyang. And some of the drones carried a low-power analog video transmitter thought to have been incapable of sending photos or video back to the North. The other evidence that implicates the North are the color and shape of the fuselages. They were very similar to the ones seen during North Korean founder Kim Il-sung's birthday parade 2 years ago. Investigators, however, failed to decode the GPS coordinates for the drone's point of return as they were concerned about damaging the information stored inside the central processing unit. A separate team of civilian experts from the South and the United States will probe the GPS system.
The scientific investigative team will mobilize all efforts to find further evidence. This includes determining the drone's point of takeoff by analyzing the photos, the data stored in the central processing unit, as well as their travel routes.
If the final results confirm the drones to be from North Korea, Seoul says it will consider it a violation of the armistice agreement and take strong measures at the international level. 최유선, 아리랑 뉴스.
In the face of mounting threats from North Korea, the air forces of South Korea and the United States begin their largest ever joint air drills this Friday. For the next 2 weeks, they will engage in war simulations to boost their combat readiness. Kim In-ji reports.
South Korea and the United States kick off their biannual Max Thunder exercise on this Friday. The 2 weeks of air drills will be the largest ever, mobilizing 103 warplanes and some 1,400 pilots, with Korea's Air Force deploying some 50 warplanes, including F-15K and KF-16 fighters. During the maneuvers, the Allies will engage in war simulation exercises. They will focus on realistic training involving precision attacks on enemy forces, disabling air defense systems, and executing supply missions for troops infiltrating bases in hostile territory. And Air Force officials at the air drills will bolster their joint combat readiness at a time of heightened tensions on the Korean peninsula. 3 drones believed to be from North Korea have been discovered in the south in recent weeks. Pyongyang has also fired off a series of ballistic missiles and rockets and threatens to conduct a new form of nuclear test. Separately, South Korea and the U.S. are still holding annual Key Resolve and Fall Eagle exercises, which will run until April 18th. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
There's a fresh wave of optimism that the key members of the 6-party talks on denuclearization will make some compromises and agree to resume dialogue in the near future. Our Hwang Joonkook reports on the back-to-back meetings between these key players.
Diplomatic activity is picking up speed to try and jumpstart the long-stalled 6-party nuclear talks. South Korean Chief Nuclear Envoy Hwang Joonkook is in Beijing Friday for talks with his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei, following a trilateral meeting with the United States and Japan in Washington earlier this week.
South Korea and China will discuss issues related to North Korea's nuclear program, including ways to resume the denuclearization talks.
The Chinese envoy will reportedly travel to Washington soon for talks with the U.S. Chief Nuclear Envoy Glenn Davies. Woo is expected to debrief South Korea and the U.S. on the results of his visit to Pyongyang last month and step up efforts to bring back North Korea to the 6-party talks. The multilateral denuclearization dialogue involving the 2 Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, has been stalled since late 2008. But anticipation about a possible resumption is growing. Following their 3-way meeting, Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo said they will consider more flexibility in bringing Pyongyang back to the negotiating table. The 3 parties have been demanding North Korea's denuclearization as a precondition to restarting the Aid for Disarmament talks. South Korea's Unification Ministry said the North may also be ready to talk things out. In its analysis of North Korea's recent Spring People's Assembly session, the ministry noted the leadership appears to have set its power structure and pointed to the possibility of the regime pursuing the resumption of the talks more aggressively down the road. Hwang Joonkook, ARIRANG News.
For the latest news that impacts Korea and the world, join Yoo Ji-hye for a lively half-hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Move aimed at fostering startups is part of the government's 3-year economic innovation plan. It's vitally important to trust the place in which you keep your hard-earned cash. But in recent days in the nation, trust in banks, credit card firms, and other financial institutions is in very short supply. Hwang Joonkook has more on the latest wave of leaks.
Yet another huge credit card company in Korea has failed to protect its clients' personal information. Financial sources said Friday that the data of some 35,000 Shinhan card customers has been leaked. The information includes credit card numbers and passwords for the company's loyalty cards. Since many clients use the same passwords for their credit and loyalty cards, this data breach has the potential to lead to mass credit card fraud. This latest discovery came as the Financial Supervisory Service looked into a recent case in which a gang hacked into a private server and stole information on credit card transactions. Aside from Shinhan, the personal information of more than 60,000 customers from companies like Card and Card was compromised. That takes the total number of people that had their information used by the ring to around 100,000. Local financial authorities on the same day opened a meeting where they ordered credit card firms to adopt integrated circuit or IC cards by the end of the year. IC cards are considered to be more secure than traditional magnetic stripe cards. Hwang Joonkook, ARIRANG News.
Samsung's latest smartphone model is out. The Korean tech giant is hoping the Galaxy S5 can put a little wind in the company's sales, which have dipped in recent months. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Samsung Electronics Galaxy S5 debuted in 125 countries on Friday as a bigger, better, and faster version of its predecessor. The S5 features a 13cm screen with a fingerprint reader, 16-megapixel camera, and a battery that lasts 20% longer than the S4. The new phone is covered with a water-resistant coating that can withstand 30 minutes at the bottom of a pool a meter deep. Samsung is hoping the S5 can boost its slacking sales after 2 straight quarters of mediocre profits. Earlier this week, the company released a provisional report saying first quarter sales amounted to $50.2 billion, down nearly 11% from the previous quarter. To increase demand, Samsung has dropped the price of its S5 model with LTE capabilities to $838. That's $30 less than the S4's price tag when it was released last July. Samsung is spreading its focus to wearable devices, including the Gear 2 smartwatch, which uses the company's own Tizen operating system and is also available Friday. Speaking at the International World Wide Web Conference held in Seoul, Samsung Electronics Executive Vice President Choi Jong-duk held his wrist up high, boasting that the Tizen optimizes the benefits of an open-source web-centric platform while minimizing privacy concerns and security breaches. Choi says the company plans to find ways to expand the application of Tizen by opening a conference for the software platform in San Francisco this upcoming June. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And over now to spreading outcry in the nation over a sentence handed down on a woman who beat her 8-year-old stepdaughter to death. Her ruling, 10 years behind bars. With the public regarding this as a light sentence, the case has sparked public outrage and prompted politicians to take extreme measures to tackle child abuse. Akanya Lee has more.
It was in this home in Gyeongsangbuk-do province where an 8-year-old girl was fatally beaten to death by her stepmother. Punched and kicked repeatedly, the girl died from a ruptured intestine last August. Her stepmother, identified only by her surname Im, and her husband went on trial this Friday morning. And despite prosecutors asking for a 20-year jail sentence for the stepmother, she was sentenced to 10 years by the judge on Friday. The father in this case was given a 3-year term for negligence, despite prosecutors asking for 7 years of jail time. Officials say the stepmother not only beat her youngest stepdaughter to death, but also forced her older stepdaughter to testify that she killed her younger sister. Public outrage surrounding the case grew even more when a letter written by the victim's 12-year-old sister claimed the stepmother had put her inside a laundry machine and let it run. Meanwhile, on the heels of Friday's trial, the Ministry of Health and Welfare released data that shows 97 children died from parental abuse from 2001 to 2012. The report, however, also notes that the number of deaths is probably higher, as many cases go unreported. In light of this case and other high-profile child abuse cases in Korea, the government is also taking action, with policymakers and ruling party lawmakers looking for ways to put an end to child abuse. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
It's time for In the Press, where we look at some of the issues that have captured the attention of the domestic media this week. From stories on Asia's skyscrapers to a new emerging trend in home appliances, we go over to our UDN for more. Leon, take it away.
Good evening and a happy Friday. Lots of interesting stories in this week's papers. But first, let's start with Chosun Ilbo, which has an interesting feature story on Asia's skyscrapers. Now, the headline over here reads, Asia changing the 21st century skyline. 9 out of top 10 skyscrapers in Asia. Now, the article says the buildings symbolize a country's national power, economic and technological competitiveness. And the photo right over here shows the top 15 tallest buildings in the world, just the top 6 here actually. And the Burj Khalifa in Dubai tops the list. Now, Korea didn't crack the top 15, but is expected to when the 555-meter tall Lotte World Tower, seen over here, goes up. It'll be the 7th tallest building in the world when it finishes construction in 2016. Now, moving on over to Donga Ilbo, and the title over here reads, Adults don't understand why we are always staring into our smartphones. Now, the paper notes the rising dependence on smartphones by students and that many of them are constantly connected to social networking sites via their smartphones, looking for consolation from the various stresses they face at home and at school. Now, whatever the reason, the fact remains that students are attached to their smartphones. The article shows the rise in the smartphone addiction rate over the past 3 years, which soared to 25% in 2013. That's nearly 3 times the rate for adults. Experts are saying the problem is taking a toll on relationships and that families need to work on communicating more. Now let's go on over to Jungang Ilbo, and the headline over here reads, Xi Jinping's Yaoqi politics, and $3.30 premier's meal that melted the hearts of 1.3 billion. Now, Jiaoqi in Chinese means simple street food. And this feature story shines light on Chinese President Xi Jinping's rather ordinary menu choices when he travels across China. And the photo here shows that he would eat meals priced even as low as $1. And this, the article says, is part of an effort to earn the trust of the people, give them a sense of homogeneity, and ultimately remove the psychological gap between the Communist Party and the people. Now, finally, moving on to some business news from the Mail Business newspaper. The trend in home appliances is changing here in Korea. Now, the title of the article reads, White home appliances, old hat. Metallic home appliances, the new trend. The Daily takes newly released refrigerators as an example, and the circle graph over here shows that while only 24 of 92 models had a metallic design in 2012, 68 out of 87 did last year. Now, LG Electronics says the change is due to consumers who say the metallic design give products a more premium look. Now, with that, I'll wrap up your look at the stories in the Korean press for this week.
It's time to check on stories making headlines on the global front, from the deepening crisis in Ukraine to another major earthquake striking South America. We go live to our Paul Lee at the News Center. Paul, let's start with Ukraine. It looks like Russian President Vladimir Putin has stirred up the pot once again.
That's right, Jay. This time, Putin is threatening to cut off gas deliveries to the country, a move that the U.S. is calling a tool of coercion. This as NATO says Russia has deployed tens of thousands of troops on the eastern Ukrainian border. Our Connie Kim reports.
The United States was quick to respond to Russian President Vladimir Putin's warning that Moscow may cut its gas supply to Ukraine. It has accused Russia of trying to take control of Ukraine using its natural resources as a leverage point.
We condemn Russia's efforts to use energy as a tool of coercion against Ukraine. Ukraine is now paying $485, a price clearly not set by market forces and well above the average price paid by EU members.
The State Department spokesperson also added that Washington is encouraging Ukraine and its western border allies to prepare to reverse natural gas flows in the pipeline so that Kiev has access to additional gas supplies if needed. Putin's warning came after Kiev missed a deadline to pay its $2.2 billion gas debt. In a letter to 18 European countries, Putin said gas giant Gazprom will be compelled to require that Ukraine make upfront payments, and that if the back payments are not made, the gas tycoon could completely or partially cease gas deliveries as a last resort. Moscow's threat is worrying for European countries as pipelines transiting Kiev carry Russian gas to several European countries, including Germany, the largest Russian gas consumer. Meanwhile, NATO released satellite images of the eastern Ukrainian border in late March and early April. They showed that some 40,000 Russian troops were deployed along with warplanes and helicopters. An official from NATO says this is a capable force that is ready to quickly move into Ukraine with orders. The revelations of the pictures come before top diplomats from the U.S., Russia, and Europe are set to gather for a ministerial-level meeting for next week. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
And Paul, turning to the latest update on the hunt for that missing Malaysian airliner, officials believe they may be closing in on the plane's black box, and appears Malaysia will claim authority over the investigation if it's found. Tell us more.
That's right, Jay. Police Chief Khalid Abu Bakar did emphasize that the investigation is ongoing, but that his team would lead the investigation if and when the black box is found.
We will be leading the investigation, all right? But of course, we don't have the expert to open up the black box and to analyze what are the contents of the data, the voice data and the flight data. We have to get experts to do it for us.
As many as 15 aircraft and 13 ships were involved in the search operation on Friday. The search zone has now been narrowed to just 600 square kilometers, located northwest of the Australian city of Perth. Australia Prime Minister Tony Abbott said he's confident the search teams are in the right area.
All right, and lastly, Paul, let's turn to South America, where another massive earthquake has hit the continent. How big was the tremor?
The first quake to strike western Nicaragua registered 6.1 on the Richter scale. Authorities say at least 23 people were injured by falling ceilings, beams, and walls. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the 6.1 quake struck at 5:27 p.m. local time near a small town 50 kilometers north of the capital, Managua. Over 100 homes were reportedly damaged. Just a half hour later, a 5.1 magnitude aftershock occurred near the initial epicenter. Officials say they are still searching for those injured while dealing with landslides blocking major roads. The earthquake hit less than 2 weeks after a magnitude 8.2 earthquake struck off Chile's northern coast on April 1st. GA?
All right, Paul, thank you very much for that update. We'll see you back in just about 2 hours. Time to get a check on the weather with our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Now, Bo-kyung, any good news for the weekend?
Well, Tia, I hope you had a nice end to the work week. As for the weather, those in Jeju may get to see showers later tonight, which will spread throughout the southern regions on Sunday. Taking a look at the current conditions, the nation is at the edge of a high-pressure system from the East Sea, which is why we're seeing cloudy skies and foggy skies across the map. Well, tomorrow, about 5 to 20 millimeters of precipitation portion will fall on Jeju, and this will hopefully take away some of the dry air. Dry weather advisories continue mostly down south, so make sure to drink sufficient amounts of water. Other than that, elsewhere in the country, we'll get to enjoy wonderful spring weather conditions, perfect for outdoor activities. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul, Daegu, and Gwangju make it to the low 20s, and Busan peaks at 19. Other regions such as Jeju will get a mix of clouds and rain. Dokdo tops out at 14, while Mount Kumgang reaches 12. Well, that's all the updates I have for Korea, and here's a look at the international weather.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul. Join us again for more news updates on our primetime news at 10 p.m. Korea time. See you then.